Welcome to the e-commerce growth show, brought to you by Segmentify.
Another episode of the e-commerce growth series here, North America, joined by Scott Emmons and Alberta Vita. So Scott, you can introduce Albert and we get to it.
All right. Thank you so much, Carlos. And we are thrilled to have Alberta Vita as our guest today. I have known Albert for several years now. We actually met as both of us were kind of on the retail innovation speaking circuit there for a while. I think I met you at Future Stores in Seattle.
Yes, Future Stores, Scott.
Yeah. So you gave an amazing talk there, and it was very inspiring for me. And we got to know each other, and I got to even visit you at your offices in Atlanta.
That's right.
When you were at Home Depot, when I was in Atlanta talking at some other conference at the time, as a matter of fact. So looking at, kind of your bio, Albert, you've been doing kind of retail strategy and technology for a long time now. You've been, a premier speaker, a keynote speaker, at a lot of major events, that retailers and e-commerce executives, attend to get better and smarter at their jobs. You are, quoted in national publications. I watched an interview with you, at the PSFK event that was very good. I thought as well, and of course, you really made your mark at the Home Depot as kind of being the innovation guy, right there, which was. I really looked up to you for that because I was, trying to run my own innovation program, at Neiman Marcus at the time and took inspiration from a lot of things you were doing. So welcome, Albert.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to join in and hopefully add some insights to all your listeners today. And Scott, what an introduction. I need you to introduce me every day and get some theme music, and it's better than a Red Bull to get that kind of introduction. So thank you, my friend. So to piggyback on what you were saying, yes, most recently parted and left the Home Depot, but really the role that I had at Home Depot was such a dream opportunity. For the past 7 years, I led strategy and innovation, particularly in the in-store experience. So in addition to being responsible for core merchandising experiences within the Home Depot and its 2,000 stores in the United States, I was also responsible for emerging technologies and even culminated in what we called a pilot store or our own store of the future. But as we take a step back and we look at the United States and this country coming out of the pandemic, and what's exciting about this topic, and I know that the subject matter of the show is e-commerce growth, but what I really want to do today is laser focus on e-commerce growth, specifically in the home improvement retail sector. I'm so passionate about retail innovation overall, but man, what's stronger than passion? I'm obsessed, and I'm white hot laser focused on the home improvement sector, not only as a former Home Depot associate, but this is just how I see things, guys. That our homes are where our lives and where our love happens. It's where our children take our first step. So yes, even though we're part of retail, to me, I feel like it's a different kind of story. The way I like to think about it is the Home Depot sells roofing and toilets and electrical sockets, right? And air conditioners. And it's not necessarily, Scott and Carlos, the most sexy, type of merchandise. But here's my challenge. I challenge anyone listening to go one day without a roof, without power, without a toilet, without air conditioning or whatever you need, especially over the summer. And then you realize that there's a different level of essential needs. It's right up there, I'm sure, with food and clothing and how we're going to protect our family. So definitely happy to be here.
Great. Thank you so much, Albert. So, I think, first of all, I would say that if it were my preference, I would drop the E out of the name of this show, and it would just be called the Commerce Growth Show.
Yes.
So, number one. So make note of that, by the way, Carlos. We're about commerce growth. And subdividing e-commerce versus other kinds of commerce is bad. We should be looking at the big picture. The thinking about the home improvement market, that has been on fire thanks to the pandemic, right? I think there's definitely been an extraordinary acceleration in that area. They were one of the winners. If I were still at Neiman Marcus, that's an area that's really struggled thanks to the pandemic, right? Not a winner as a result. So innovation even more important, I think there, right? That as a means of survival. Where if you think about home improvement, innovation is really, crucial as a way to keep up, right? With the speed of growth that's going on there. So tell us, do you have some insight into what growth looked like over the last year in that
absolutely. And so to your point, Scott, as an insider at the Home Depot last year, and it was one of the things that was a conflict for us was we were seeing dramatic growth across all of the merchandising categories and digitally, but it was always important to keep in mind why it was happening. I mean, people were sick, people were dying. And so even though comps were through the roof, it was always tempered. It was always, let's make sure we do what's right for first and foremost, what's right for our customers safety-wise and what's right for our associates safety-wise, and really making sure that we maintain that essential status as a retailer was definitely top of mind for a retailer like the Home Depot. Excuse me, guys. Oops, let me grab a drink of water.
Okay, of course. We'll allow it.
You guys got me excited. I'm just beside myself. So I wanted to maybe you guys can edit that out of post-production. Carlos, that's all you, buddy. So, but the point I was trying to make
Sure.
was that home improvement retailers across the board really are coming out of the pandemic in a position of strength, really stronger than before. And this is when I say across the board, Lowe's, Menards, Ace Hardware, Tractor Supply, the Home Depot, right? Like all of the major players in this sector are coming out of COVID in definitely a stronger position. And so let's dive into some of the numbers just a little bit, Scott. So and I'll be focusing mostly on Home Depot and Lowe's as well. So
Sure.
The way we want to talk about e-commerce growth or commerce growth coming out of the pandemic really needs to start several years ago, even pre-COVID, right? Several years ago when the Home Depot announces their go-to-market strategy, which is referred to as One Home Depot, Lowe's has a similar growth strategy according to their priorities, which they call Lowe's Total Home. And so each of these major home improvement retailers have their disparate growth strategies. But if you look at fiscal year 2020, massive growth, right? These are billion-dollar organizations that in the Home Depot's case comp 20% year over year, and Lowe's comp 26% for the year. I mean, it's massive. And if you just look at Q1 of this year, of 2021, I mean, the comps each of these companies both crushed it. Home Depot had a 33% comp over Q1 last year. Lowe's had a 26% comp over last year. I mean, just crushing it. So let's hone in to e-commerce, right? And if you look at Q1 of just this year, the Home Depot saw a 27% year-over-year increase in sales digitally, whereas Lowe's saw a 37% growth in Q1 from last year. I mean, these are monstrous numbers. And then even if you take a step back, right, from Q1 of this year and go back 2 years, the Home Depot over 100% growth and Lowe's digitally over 146% growth digitally. So these are the way that my mind wraps, where my mind goes to when you hear such dramatic growth of digital numbers is what are the downstream effects, right? Store impacts, associates, labor, supply chain, right? What's the vendor's ability to provide product when your online channels are burning through so much inventory so quickly? Scott, I mean, speaking about the Home Depot for a second, I mean, the Home Depot absolutely saw a spike in its digital channels. And what that meant was that the interaction between those digital channels, its customers, its stores, and its associates shifted. I mean, the Home Depot had to rearrange that whole equation, right? And digital wasn't just about buying online and getting it delivered. And we're talking about expanding BOPIS, Curbside. I know you've talked a lot about on the show, lockers, express garden delivery, and more. I mean, the reason why it was important to talk about a couple of years ago and One Home Depot and the architecture and the supply chain and the investments that Home Depot made years ago was that because it spent years and a major investment to connect logistics, delivery, supply chain, and its customers and its digital, what COVID did for the Home Depot was really provide a chance to exercise that muscle, right? To exercise all that muscle that was put in place to support the One Home Depot strategy. So let me take a pause here and let you react. But for me, the data clearly shows that because Lowe's and Home Depot invested so heavily leading up to last year, it really put both of those companies in a good position to take advantage when there was opportunity. So,
thinking back, over the years, I lived through the .com bust. I lived through the 2008 crash, which were both devastating, to the at least the segment of retail I was in, and those years of my career, I was on the data side of things and the business intelligence side of things. And so, one of the things, we were tasked with doing was, how to filter all that data out as an anomaly so that, when we were looking at comps, prior year comps, we were looking at, examples that did not necessarily include these one-time events. Right, these bumps in the road. So if you think about COVID, let's hope that was a bump that's here and now. Maybe we're at least at the beginning of the end of that. It feels a little like that, though. News from India and other places, are concerning. But it feels a little bit like maybe we're seeing the beginning of the end. So what do we do we need to be careful about? Over exuberance, with those numbers?
Yeah, what an interesting question, and the way that I'm interpreting it, Scott, is okay. Where do we go from here? On top of that, right? So one of the things that I look at were what were Americans deferring last year, and what I mean by that, the stats show that 49% of Americans deferred vacations, deferred traveling, and deferred attending events. Makes total sense with the pandemic.
Yeah, 20% of the country. You couldn't if you wanted to.
Yeah, that's right. And about 20% of the country deferred buying a car, for example. So there's a lot of deferred purchases. One of the stats as well, Scott, that I want to throw out there is that despite the massive growth we saw in home improvement, 29% of Americans also deferred home improvement projects. So for me, how I'm interpreting that is that despite the growth of last year, I'm still very bullish on the home improvement sector, both physical stores as well as online, at least certainly for the next 2 years. And because that deferred backlog of projects is healthy. And if you look at the real estate market overall, home prices are continuing to rise. Homeowners' balance sheets are healthy. And all of those factors lend towards more homeowners spending more. So for me, I feel like, yes, it was a blip. And it certainly had some positive repercussions commercially for these companies. But I'm still saying that I'm going on the record saying that at least for the next 2 years, I'm seeing some outpaced growth as well. Scott, as well, if you take a look at HomeDepot.com, just as a standalone site, I mean, the word that comes to mind is just monstrous, right? If it was a standalone e-commerce site, HomeDepot.com would be one of the 5th largest in the country. HomeDepot.com had 3.6 billion visits last year, and what that means, doing some of the quick math, right? If you take out all the infant children in the country, it means that every man and woman in the United States went to HomeDepot.com 15 times each last year, right? So, I mean, these are it's really sort of like mind-boggling numbers. I mean, also the fact, Scott, that 55% of online orders for the Home Depot are picked up in a store. I mean, man, we start talking about mixed cart, right? And this idea of a customer's cart being fulfilled through multiple channels, store, online, DC, right? And that sort of mixed cart message. And it's just such an interesting story. There's a quote I have here from Craig Menear, who's the CEO of Home Depot. The investments we made in the business over the past year were the right ones, as they have enabled agility and flexibility to execute on critical business decisions in challenging and dynamic operational environments. I mean, that to me sums it up, right? You bet big on supply chain, logistics, and big, right? As a matter of fact, Home Depot is continuing to make investments. If you take its massive supply chain footprint, which then drives e-commerce, right? You start thinking about the distribution centers, right? Home Depot is looking to grow its supply chain fulfillment space by 70% this year in 2021. So you take a beast of a supply chain and you almost double it this year. I mean, you can see where some of these investments are paying off.
Yeah, it's I for sure, over the last year, there were really only kind of 2 kinds of stores that I frequented, and that was grocery and home improvement. Right, that was with home improvement being about the only entertainment outlet around as you went stir crazy.
We heard that. We heard that, like, because it was open, like families were coming to the store, and hey guys, in all seriousness, I mean, we did place restrictions on number of people, but like whole families were coming through because we were open, right? And
look,
I had heard that before, Scott.
You guys, you and Lowe's both were pretty quick to ramp up curbside, and not without its bumps.
Yes.
I'll say. I mean, I used the curbside many times. I'm fully vaccinated now, so I've gone back to going in the store now. But I definitely use curbside. Now, let's talk about that, because that's everybody's first go-to example of how we innovated during the pandemic. And I would say that at the Home Depot experience, they curbside was pretty good, but there was definitely room for improvement in terms of speed of execution and amount of store staff that were dedicated to it, and the kind of buy-in from the local stores on the process. What were the challenges to roll that out as good a product as they clearly wanted it to be?
Yeah, no, Scott, I know that the topic of curbside has come up on a couple other episodes on this show, so I'm happy to share the home improvement lens through that as well. And having personally gone through that last year, I'd be the first one to say that absolutely kudos to the over 400,000 associates that enabled curbside. But let's be honest, the speed at which we rolled it out, the manner in which we rolled it out, right? We knew early on that there were going to be bumps and bruises and that this was not going to be the end all be all, right? In addition to curbside, one of the things that we rolled out as a company across the stores, across the chain, was plexiglass, right? And how do we keep our customers safe in terms of both in terms of just social distancing and just doing what we can to separate, to make sure we slow down the any kind of spread of the virus. But there were a lot of initiatives last year, Scott, that certainly in terms of exercising the muscle and hats off to the leadership team as well that made that possible, and the associates that made that possible. But I without going too far into it, I would just say I'd be the first one to raise my hand and say, I absolutely recognize the friction. I absolutely recognize the confusion, even for me personally, right? You pull up to the parking lot of a home improvement warehouse, right? And the signage of where to go isn't clear, right? It's not clear, right? And so, or the signage in the parking lot fell over, or whatever the case may be. I just say that obviously curbside is going to be a big deal moving forward. But from an operator perspective, Scott, it was just we were doing everything we could at the time with the resources and time we had.
Look, yeah, I mean, let's talk about the signage in the parking lot, actually, because, it was temporary. It was built out of home improvement materials that they took out of the store and, built homemade stands, and stapled signs to it that said, pick up space 1, pick up space 2, and it's still that way today, right? So
yeah,
is there a long-term commitment to, continuing with curbside?
Yeah, absolutely. The visual merchandising director in me would say we didn't actually buy stuff off the shelf and put it. We did a one step above that. But let me put it to you this way: wayfinding is still the number one customer pain point when shopping a physical big box home improvement store, whether it's Lowe's or Home Depot or Menards, which is even larger than those two other stores. And the wayfinding even begins outside, right? And so the way I like to think about this is never been there with really fresh eyes. One of the things I always talked about with my team was how do we protect our fresh eyes, right? Because you're staring at curbside and plexiglass and store operations as a job. And so then you get desensitized to what the real customer might feel in that situation, right?
Absolutely.
It's just human nature that we lose a little bit of empathy on what that first time shopper is seeing because we're just so close to it. So certainly empathy is definitely one of the things that we talked about as well. But to your point, right? Like just opportunities abound, right? Like clearly curbside is going to be here to stay. I mean, I've heard some conversations and a common question I get asked, what were some of the changes that we implemented during COVID that you would see survive into the future? And obviously, curbside is one of the first ones that comes to mind. So I think at the end of the day, once retailers, and certainly not just Lowe's and Home Depot and home improvement, but once retailers start getting some of the data and start having more of a runway in terms of being able to learn, okay, we put this out into the parking lot, the first rain, it knocked it over. Or we put this into the parking lot and 70% of our customers still were confused about where to go into Curbside. So for us, it's like, oops, I got another one. Carlos, edit this out, okay?
We like it. It makes you human, Albert. We're fine
exactly. With it. Thank you, Scott. Makes you look even better.
Guys, I'm drinking. I don't want to like spew while I'm live.
We know that that's a glass full of vodka. We get it.
No, it's 9:30 a.m. So maybe in a couple hours, my friend. But at the end of the day, like I was saying before, both Lowe's and Home Depot and the other home improvement big box retailers really showed a lot of agility, a lot of innovation. Even what Lowe's is doing as far as spring, one of the things that I was really impressed by that Lowe's did recently was their Spring Fest, right? And you start thinking about omnichannel and interconnected retail. What Lowe's did with Spring Fest was just brilliant. So every week in the month of April, they offered free garden kits as a surprise.
They were every time I tried to get one, they were out of them. By the way,
yeah,
so there's a bad side to that. Yeah.
But what happened was it required the new user to activate their My Lowe's account online, and so to me, it was just one of those opportunities where really thinking through omnichannel, how can we use our digital properties to actually acquire new customers and activate them in a physical store. So for me, I just feel like it was just a great example. Well, Scott, I know
I thought it was smart. I thought it was very smart.
I waited in line to get mine, but if you look at the Lowe's bucket behind me, one of the weeks was a garden kit. One of the weeks was a mystery piñata, right? And so you can see that behind me as well. But it was just for me, a great example on Lowe's part from an omnichannel and an innovation perspective.
Yeah,
Scott, I don't want to digress too much, but it's interesting for me as a Brazilian living in Denmark, talking to two guys in North America, seeing that you keep an eye, a very close.
Confusing. Everything about you is confusing, Carlos.
I understand. Well, let's keep rolling. You got Albert. You're mentioning Lowe's, and I find that very interesting because you mentioned that because you have them as a benchmark, and you used to keep a very close eye at what they were doing, and so you could see. I don't know. Is it a competitor in the first place?
Oh, absolutely. Right now, keep in mind, I no longer have my Home Depot orange apron on.
Sure.
But as a day job, right? I mean, Home Depot's perspective, from my opinion, was always focused on the customer, right? We had an expression at Depot, when we take care of our associates will take care of our customers, and everything else will take care of itself. So more so than focus any competitor in the space, whether it's a Lowe's or a Wayfair or a Floor and Decor or something like that. The obsession is not on the competitor, but certainly what can we do operationally to improve and focus on our own metrics that we can control. But clearly, Wall Street, as well as the rest of the country, I'm sure, a lot of the times when you're talking about home improvement as a sector, Lowe's and Home Depot get mentioned in the same sentence, right? And for example, even their quarterly earnings, right? They're one day apart, right? And a lot of the times, like the analysts will compare head to head, even just like what I did today, as far as some of the numbers when you can look at it either annually or per quarter. But no, absolutely. So I would say that not only from a competitive perspective, but certainly from a benchmarking, and certainly Lowe's is absolutely a leader in this space. If you take a step back and we talk a lot about home improvement as if it's one thing, and really it's not, right? You double click on home improvement and you realize there's really three major merchandising categories within home improvement, and certainly that's how Home Depot defined it: decor, building materials, right, and hard lines, right? And so decor, everything from paint, flooring, kitchen and bath, right? Then you get into building materials, lumber, plumbing, electrical, and then you get into some of the hard lines, right? Which would be things like power tools, hardware, garden, outdoor garden, things like that. And certainly when you start talking about home improvement, the idea is that most home improvement retailers talk about their customers in three primary customer segments. You've got the pro, right, which is the professional contractor, professional plumber, professional electrician. This is how I make my livelihood. Right? Then you have a second category, the DIY, right, the do-it-yourselfer, and then now a third growing category, which is often referred to as the DIFM, which is the do-it-for-me. So I'm knowledgeable, I know what I want, and so that
would be me too. Yeah.
And it's interesting too, but to me, I just feel like, and we'll kind of get into what my current venture is in just a little bit, but to me, there's even a fourth category, right? And this is what I'm focusing my latest venture, Homebirds, on. Is that I'm betting that there's actually a fourth category. So if you look at that spectrum, pro, DIY, DIFM, I'm betting that there's a fourth category over here that no one really talks about, which I'm calling the DKA. Don't know.
Hold there. We'll save that as a surprise for the end. So to hold the audience, through the end of the episode.
Oh, the whole is okay. Yeah. But I'm happy to talk about what we're working on now.
We're gonna find out the new mysterious fourth category from Albert. But let's continue our general discussion about the home improvement market and in general, and as you were talking about Lowe's and Home Depot and kind of the different categories, things. I love that you mentioned floor and decor. I think that's a very good experience. I've certainly I've shopped there for things and was happy with the experience I got there. I frequent Ace Hardware, my local Ace Hardware, a lot. It's also a very good experience, and it's one of those deals where it costs a little more, but it's more intimate and it's more personalized and it's easier to get in and out of than a big box, that kind of thing. It has some things going for it. Right. And they also are very good about incenting me to come with discounts and coupons and $5 off things and stuff. Right. Yeah. They're pretty capable. And then the last one that, is definitely the elephant in the room is Tractor Supply. They're just freaking knocking it out of the park. Right.
Yeah. No, it's pretty awesome. And here's the interesting thing, Scott. I know you'll appreciate this. And obviously our competitors in blue get mentioned a lot with Home Depot. But the important thing to realize is that there are certain players, niche players, that are dominant in their space. Like for example,
Harbor Freight. Yeah,
exactly right. And like if you're looking for lighting and deco lighting, I think it's a mistake to not go to Wayfair and take a look at what they've got. Right, and if you're looking to redo your floors, I think you have to look at Floor and Decor, right, and kind of what they're doing over there too. So at the end of the day, like I'm rooting for all of the retailers. I'm rooting for retail in this space, and because at the end of the day, who I care about most is the homeowner, right? And the more competition and the more innovation, to me, I just feel like it's who benefits. It's going to be the homeowner.
My tagline used to be, it's not about the store of the future, it's about the customer of the future. That should be the focus, and that's really what you just said, I think.
Yeah.
We'll go back to Home Depot since that's your alma mater. And so one of the things that really stands out about the Home Depot experience is the mobile app, right? It has some very knock your socks off capabilities. what was your involvement in bringing some of that, that wayfinding, which is amazing, and then there's also a pretty incredible image search capability that didn't really get as much airplay as you would think, right?
Right.
But pretty capable.
Yeah, no, the image search capability is one of the ones that absolutely is one of my favorites as well. But let me answer the question directly. So you take a step back, and I agree with you. What the team did on the mobile app side was nothing short of amazing. And my role really was, how do we activate this in the store? What are some of the mobile best practices, leadership lessons, technologies that we could potentially activate in the store to benefit the customer that's physically walking around one of the 2,000 stores? And Scott, you hit it right on the head. And I'm going to keep coming back to our number one problem, which is going to be wayfinding, right? So which image search also is an element of that as well. But one of the tests that we did at our pilot store was to introduce our wayfinding capabilities from the mobile app onto tablets and large screens, large touch screens inside the store. One of the things as well was that in addition to typing in what you were looking for, we were also tested voice, right? Being able to have a customer speak to the screen and being able to then guide through there. One of the other tests that we did in addition to the wayfinding was just content, right? The amount of rich how-to content that's available online through HomeDepot.com, and what's the right way to activate that in the store? One of the things as well, Scott, one of the questions that I got frequently, as being the program lead for our store of the future or our pilot store, was what was your favorite pilot? What was the pilot that you personally?
That's a good question. I want to ask that question.
So Scott, and Carlos, for your benefit as well, imagine this, right? The Home Depot takes an actual store in the Atlanta area that's average in terms of its square footage, 100,000 square feet, and revenues at a live store, and we put in 90 plus unique pilots into a single store. Mm-hmm. And the amazing thing, and not to get into the specifics, but let me actually just get right to the punchline, right? The vast majority of our 90, 100 pilots that we put into the store were one and done, meaning I'm glad we did it. We're glad we did it, but it's not going to live on to rollout, right? That's the vast majority. But a small percentage, Scott, and this is something that's going to tap into your Neiman days, is that a small percentage were out of the park home runs, right? So whereas the vast majority were like iffy, questionable, right? But based on the KPIs and the analytics and the camera analytics that we use, Scott, we identified 5 that were out of the park home runs, and then received a huge subsequent investment into the stores downstream as well. But the amazing thing about this, Carlos and Scott, if I were to list the 100 pilots, the 90 pilots that we put into this store, and without knowing what were the handful that were really going to be out of the park home runs based on customer feedback, associate feedback, sales, those kinds of things, I bet that all 3 of us would not get it right. I'd be surprised if all 3 of us didn't get any of the handful.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I lived at something right? Similar. Yeah.
Yeah, because you start thinking innovation, and we've been so conditioned that digital equates innovation. Mm-hmm. Right. And it just absolutely was not my experience. Right. When we start talking about empathy and humility and absence of ego as tools, when you're actually designing, these are critical tools. I actually call them superpowers. But here's the thing. Right. And when you talk about human-centered design, it's so easy to say, but so difficult to actually implement, right? And so you realize that what actually moved the needle for our customers and associates was not the tech, wasn't the AR, VR, it wasn't the AI tests or the voice commerce tests that moved it. It was very human, environmental types of things, and the one that is most visible is the improved sign package, right? You start looking at wayfinding as the biggest problem that we were facing from a physical store perspective. So it just stands to reason, right? You improve the directional signage in the store to allow a customer to self-solve throughout the store. So for me, it was just one of those opportunities where starting off with the mobile technology and trying to be creative with how we can reuse some of that. There was also just massive learning where and when technology makes sense inside a physical store.
Okay, so I'm gonna sum all that up with 3 statements, right? The first thing you told us was you have to kiss a lot of frogs, but eventually you'll find a prince. That's the first thing you told us, right? You need to solve real problems for your customers, right? That's where you find success. And just because it's digital, shiny, and new does not make it better. Those are the 3 things I just heard from you. Yeah.
Scott, it's funny. I've been using this line for years now, and I'll bring it up again, which is random acts of digital don't work. I mean, it's so clunky, right? Like, the amazing thing is
I may have been guilty. I may have been guilty of a few random acts of digital.
My friend. But hey, we've been there certainly as well. But I've lost track of how many requests I got. Hey, why can't we put an iPad over here? Let's put a touchscreen over here, or how about some digital signage? So certainly that's why for me the biggest pilot or the biggest innovation for me coming out of Pilot Store and our Store of the Future was some new muscle tissue around measuring innovation in the stores, whether that's cameras, whether it's customer insights, right? However you need to get the data in terms of, is this working or not? And the reality is that sales is just the tip of the iceberg, right? Mm-hmm. So imagine an iceberg. I talk about this all the time, right? Like, you're measuring innovation, sales, which is what most retailers use today, tip of the iceberg. So what are we hearing from the customers themselves? True customer qualitative information, quotes, and did you even notice it? Associate feedback, as well as cross-functional metrics. Like, I put something into a store, what does that do for shrink? What does that do to boost online? What does that do for labor forecasting for the store? So there's cross-functional metrics all tied into designing a physical store. And Scott, believe me, if there's anyone on the planet that knows, I know I'm preaching to the choir with you, Mr. Emmons. And so, but that's just been my experience as well.
Well, let's roll our sleeves up just a little bit, and we'll get down into the fine grain. We were talking about the mobile app, right? And it's having a great mobile app is amazing, right? But it's not amazing if you go in the store and there's no signal and there's no Wi-Fi coverage. I participated with a team that built an amazing app for our customers and an amazing app for our associates, and it turned out our Wi-Fi in our stores sucked, right? And it took me 3 years to fix it, right? It was a 3-year project to fix the Wi-Fi. What were the infrastructure challenges you had to bring these amazing innovations like the mobile app and visual search and so forth?
Yeah, no, I mean, for us, as the in-store experience designer, Scott, I really tried to steer clear from the store Wi-Fi, mostly because customers use that, right? And we knew early on that it was spotty. That was just the truth, right? The network would go down, the wireless network would go down multiple points in the day without warning. So it was really difficult for us to test a technology on that. Now, since then, I know Team Orange has made massive investments in improving the store Wi-Fi. But to answer your question directly, what were some of the challenges with bringing some of these up infrastructure-wise? If you steer clear of Wi-Fi, I'm just going to call it the pipe size, bandwidth. Right?
Yeah, that was another huge problem for us too.
Yeah, like let's just call it bandwidth, right? Because one of the tests that I put into the store was I hypothesized that having a live social media feed inside the store would benefit the customers. In other words, what you could see real time tweets, real time posts on Pinterest and Twitter in the store to kind of again get into that multi-channel perspective. In addition to that sort of like live social media feed, we were pumping in a ton of digital content that was held at a third-party cloud infrastructure, right? So next thing you know, you need a bandwidth for that. I've already talked about how we wanted to bring in online content into the stores. And so we had these 55-inch screens on the end caps. So for me, I feel like there was a lot of demand needed for some of that. And so it was just obviously the pipe size and just bandwidth overall was definitely going to be an opportunity. One of the other things that we far and away kept me up at night was, from an innovation perspective, Scott, was maintenance. Let's call it whatever, day 2, day 30, day 100 support. Like, what I'm trying to say is, as you're designing the experience and on day 1 and the night of install, it's working great. It's working perfectly. It's working great. But I'm just saying how it's only a matter of time, right, before a customer rams into it with a flatbed, right, or some 2x4, rams into it, or for whatever reason it goes down, right? And one of the things that was a painful lesson for me was that we as humans and retail designers, we focus on the target and we focus on bringing that target live that day, right? And then what happens is we high five and we hug each other. And then what happens the next day, Scott? Like, we all disperse into the wind.
Yeah.
So then the reality is that day 2, day 30, day 100, day 365, it goes down, right? So what is that support? Is it IT that supports this? Is it my team that supports this? I'm just saying that maintenance of some of these innovations were killer, right? So I think that certainly the pipe and the bandwidth maintenance, those are some of the big ones as well. Training, raising awareness,
that's what I was going to mention was,
it was a big deal for us as well. Over 400,000 store associates, and how are you going to raise awareness about that? So I could go on. I know I'm pushing my hour time here, gentlemen, but
yes. So
honestly, we could have a round 2, just talk about that stuff.
Yeah, we'd love to have a round 2, but let's before we run out of time, let's let you get to your 4th area and that we promised the audience. And let's talk about your venture.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, gentlemen. And really, this is the opportunity that I'm thinking through is, how do I take this knowledge about home improvement and innovation and what am I going to do next? And I love retail so much that upon reflection, my greatest contribution to retail wouldn't be to go back to consulting, and wouldn't even necessarily be to go back to work for another retailer. But my greatest contribution would be, for me personally, is to start up my own retail brand, right? Which I'm calling Homebirds. Now, the target market for Homebirds is still going to be in home improvement. And as I mentioned before, and Scott has kind of built up the suspense, a 4th category, which I like to call the DKA, the don't know anythings, right? And Scott and Carlos, you guys both know this, right? Just because you buy a home doesn't automatically make you a DIY, right? Mm-hmm. And so what does that mean? And so for me, that there is a large percentage of new homeowners today, right, that without shop class in high school, right, without firsthand experience, right, and what are they going to do from a home improvement perspective? Scott, one of the things that I learned in this journey is that 72% of new homeowners have zero experience in home improvement. So what does that mean, right? And what does that mean for the millennials post-COVID and in the middle of COVID that bought a house, in the U.S. in the past 12 months, right? And one of the most sobering stats that I read recently, Scott, was that 64% of millennials that purchased a home in the past 12 months have regretted, right? They have regrets about the home, right? And there is a common pitfall affecting millennial homeowners today is that they're focused so much on the actual purchasing of the home and being able to qualify, get the loan for the home, and not enough thought on what happens when you get the keys and how do you actually maintain. The biggest regret, right? The biggest pain point for these homeowners is the cost of home maintenance, right? Number one pain point for these new first-time homeowners is Carlos, it's so funny, but like they underestimate the cost of home maintenance, right? And so for me, right, you start, especially with the knowledge of home improvement, the purpose of the brand Homebirds and what I'm looking to build is really a platform, right? A shopping platform, a content platform, really focused on that first-time homeowner, and who I affectionately call a don't know anything, right? Mm-hmm. And let's be honest, right? There's no pride here. I walk, in home improvement stores, even with my experience, and I'm confused a lot, right? And so for me, the eye-opening opportunity is that after 7 years of intensive home improvement retail experience, and I walk through, these home improvement stores myself, and I'm confused. To me, there's an opportunity, and my focus, Scott, is absolutely on how can I best serve first-time homeowners in the U.S. and the best way I can do that is really adopt this. I'm with you, right? Like, I certainly am a don't know anything in many categories. And so certainly look forward to being back on the show and updating you on how progress is going.
So Albert, I think you're onto something there. I think that's an amazing use case, amazing story. I'm living that in somewhat. I'm a pretty capable do-it-yourselfer. But I have a millennial daughter that just recently, like just a month or two ago, bought her first home, and she's definitely a DKA. Yeah. Who just went through a bunch of major renovations, on the home, and really had to just learn everything from scratch. So I know could have benefited from what you're offering. So, I think you're going to be very successful at this. We want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to get to talk to you, Albert, and I'm so happy we got to share some of your insight with our audience. So thank you so much for
thank you guys so much. Stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right. You have a great day.